We are now going to review some functions that you can find on your service contract. So let's review following functions. First, we're going to have a look at sign, lock, and open. Then we're going to have a look at the changelog function, the file function, create service invoice or credit memo, remove contract lines, change customer, and finally copy document. So let's start with the open and lock contract function. So on your service contract, you can find them here, open contract and lock contract. We have already discussed them. We have used them already in the previous lessons. But remember, if you want to make changes to your contract, you will have to first open it. And then when you have made your changes and you want them to be operational, you will have to lock your contract. Now let's explore how the sign contract function works. Well, typically when you start making a new contract, and the first question is, do you want to use a template? Let's say that we're going to make a non-prepaid contract here. So I'm going to use that template, and by consequence a number of parameters and fields are already filled in. Let me make one for instance, Candoxy. Then you see that the status here of your service contract is blank. Now I'm first going to add a service item here so that we have something inside of our contract. So our status is blank. What can we do now? We can sign our contract, because at this stage now, like it is now, this contract will have no operational effect at all. So we're going to click sign contract, and then we get the question, do you want to sign service contract? If you click on yes, then already an invoice will be created. And you see now that the status is signed. And you see also that the change status is locked. So by clicking on sign contract, your status of your service contract will change from blank to signed. And also your change status is automatically put to locked. The moment that I want to make changes now, I need to open my contract again and then later on lock them. You can also file contracts. How do you do that? Well, you go to the Actions tab, and here you can see File Contract. And if you click on it, you will get a question whether or not you want to file your contract. If you then go to Navigate, you can see your filed contracts, and here you can see all your versions. So, for instance, I've changed here a version tag myself. In the previous time I clicked on File for this contract. I just clicked it again. Of course, I didn't change anything here, but what you see now is that we have two versions with V3, for instance, and two without. And by working so, you can keep copies of previous versions of your contract. Now, besides filing the contracts, you can also make use of the changelog. Remember also that this is a setting which you need to set up, that you want to track all the changes. But if you did so, then you can always use this function, changelog, and when you click on it, you see everything which has been changed. And you see at a certain point, of course, we created the contract, so everything here was filled in. Then we signed it, and then I made a change in the description, because I changed it from non-prepaid contract software, this value here, to non-prepaid contract software version 3. So by using the changelog function here, you can track all the relevant and important changes on your contract. Another function that we can use is the change customer function. So you can change the customer of your service contract. Now, before you use this function, you again first need to open your contract. So in this case, my change status is open, so I can use it now. So let's click on change customer. And you see here the contract number, service item number, existing customer number, existing ship to code. What are we going to do now? We're going to switch it, and I'm going to randomly choose another customer like Sportsmeyer Furnishing. I click on OK, and then I click on OK. If you change the customer number or the ship to code, the related service orders and sales invoices will not be updated. So this is very important, because that means that if you have outstanding invoices and orders, they will not be changed. So it's only for the future, for upcoming invoices and upcoming service orders. So, and once we have done that, so now you see here that my non-prepaid contract is now one for Sportsmeyer Furnishing. To make new service contracts, you can also use the service, the copy document function. So for instance, here I've added a new header with a contract number and a specific customer. So those are the two fields or the information that you need to add before you can use the copy document function. So you see here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy from an existing document, and then I get the list for this customer, customer 1000, which is the same as this customer. And I can say, for instance, I'm going to copy this contract, and then I'm going to create the details, and you see them coming up here now. So sorry, you see them here, the details are copied from the existing contract. So you can use the copy document function to make it a little bit easier to fill in a number of details. Now you can also, at some point, you may want to remove contract lines from your service contract. And that means removing service items here from the line. Now this is going to work with this function, remove contract lines, but it will take in consideration a date field, which you find at the end here, contract expiration date. Now this is not filled in, so let's have a look what happens if we use this function now. So here it says remove lines up until 25th of January 2018. Now let's say we are going to check this as OK. Then we get 0 contract lines was removed. Why? Because there was nothing to remove here. The contract expiration date for this service item was left blank. So let's fill in the contract expiration date, and let's try to fill in a date like this. There we go. And then I'm going to lock my contract again. You see the change status is locked. Now I'm going to open it. And now I'm going to again use this function, remove contract lines. I will click on OK. And what you see now is one contract line is removed. So you see here that this function, remove contract lines, is going to work with the contract expiration date. So what you see now is that we have now a contract without service item lines on it, or contract lines on it. And when you have a look here, that also immediately have an impact on your invoice details. So what you see now is that you have in this example a calculated annual amount of 0. So there is nothing to invoice here. And yet, and you have to watch out with that, your invoicing period now is monthly. But of course, there is nothing to invoice anymore. And now let's assume that brings us to another function. That brings us to the function of create a service invoice. Now here you can see a number of things coming together, because also our change status is open from our previous action. And we don't have an annual amount anymore. Now let's have a look. So what is this function doing? Create service invoice. Well, it's explaining itself. You can use this function if you want to invoice your contract. And what are you normally going to invoice? Well, that's specified here in your invoice details. You're going to invoice on a specific date, the next invoice date. You're going to invoice for a specific period. And what are you going to invoice? Well, the amount for that period. Now, as you can see here, this is 0. So, but normally that is what is happening when you're going to create a service invoice. Now you can see, first of all, to start with, the change status must be locked. So normally in a lot of the functions, the change status has to be open. Now here the change status needs to be locked. So we have to lock this contract. And then it says the next error you get, you cannot lock a service contract with 0 annual amount when the invoice period is different from none. So we will not be able to execute now the create service invoice from this service contract. Now let's have a look at this contract, service contract number 2, and let's have a look on the invoicing details that we have for this service contract. So this is a service contract which is signed, and it has calculated that this amount needs to be invoiced on a monthly basis, and the next invoice period is the 1st of March 2018 with this amount. Now let's assume that it is March 2018. So let's change the work date for our system here. So let's say that we are now March the 1st. So we have a different posting date, working date now. And let's now try and use this function, create a service invoice. Okay, the change status needs to be locked. So let's do that. Lock our contract. And then now let's create our invoice or use that function. Do you want to create an invoice for the contract? And you say yes, and now the invoice was successfully created. And you see number of unposted invoices here. So we have not posted it yet. We have we just created it, and that's probably this one. So let's have a look here on that invoice, and then let's scroll down a little bit. So you see for a specific service contract. And then you see all the amounts are here calculated. So this is what you get here. This is the invoice created with that function, create service invoice. Now let's move back to our service contract. I'm going to close it. I'm not going to post it. And what you see now from our service contract in the invoice details is that the next invoice date is now 1 month later. And the last invoice date is the date of the invoice that we just created. In the same way, so we generated this invoice by using create service invoice. If you go to actions, you will also see that you can use in the same way a manual function which is called create credit memo. And you can make service credit memos, for instance, for service contract lines on which the expiration date has expired, for instance. That is all possible, and you can use that in the same manual way.